Welcome to 2.6.1 Communication, Unit 2.6. Firstly, what is communication? It is defined as the exchange or transfer of information, data, or ideas. Ways you can do that normally in a business is staff meetings, reports, telephone conversations, emails, and sometimes in tea breaks, which is like informal. Formal is something that is like professional. We'll go through the details of that. Informal is more like casual, just so we can have a quick idea in our minds what it means. So the purpose of communication is normally to inform or to give instructions, notify, clarify, to respond, to receive feedback, a review. But we're not just looking for communication; we're looking for effective communication to make sure that the message has successfully been transferred from the one who's giving it to the one who's receiving. So it's important that it is effective, so employees are clear about the expectations of their roles and their responsibilities, and also that managers respond appropriately to the feedback from customers, from the employees, and other stakeholders. Effective communication. So, like we said before, you have the transmitter here, which is the sender of the communication, and they have an aim. If they use it, they need to use the appropriate language in order to communicate that, and that message carries on. So they have an aim, they use a language, they pass it as a message. But sometimes there's a barrier that blocks the message from being understood in the way that it was intended. So then you've got the receiver who receives this message, some better than others, and then they have a response to this message, and the feedback loop goes on. So, like we said before, formal methods of communication are all professional ways, normally written communication, and that are and when it comes to spoken, it's more to do with meetings, official meetings that also have written documents like minutes, which records down what was agreed and who was supposed to be doing what, and accountability and deadlines. So, always written communication is formal when it comes to official documentation. This doesn't go mean that anything written is formal, as in like WhatsApp and other forms of communication wouldn't be seen as formal. That's more in the informal communication method where you're just having a lunch break, or you just happen to be playing football or any type of sports, and then something comes up and you're just talking informally about something. When it comes to for a workplace, you're talking about lunchtime, or you're talking about, it could be an assembly, it could be any time which is not scheduled, planned. Communication methods. So we've got, okay, written, spoken, electronic, visual, interpersonal communication. You can have facial expressions. Yes, we just need to note that it is also someone, smiling or showing a frown, is also communication. And informal communication, which we've mentioned, can be gossip, and obviously gossip can come in any one of these forms. Visual communication, obviously, we don't always think about it, but yes, maps, signs, diagrams are also communication. It's giving the message. Key terms: effective communication, exchange of information between people or groups with feedback. Feedback: information given by the receiver in response to the message. We've covered informal and formal communication. Communication methods, the ways that we mentioned before, the 5, 6 different ways. Barriers: something that gets in the way of the message being received. Interpersonal communication, which is shared between two or more people. And we've mentioned by spoken communication. Information overload: when there's too much information, so many messages. This sometimes happens when being in a larger organization where you have many messages released back to back, it can sometimes mask the first message, or sometimes the first message, because you're reading it, you missed the last message. You didn't even realize you had those messages sent at the same time. So you kind of have something called, called information overload. Barriers to effective communication. You have a failure in one of the stages, poor attitudes of the sender or receiver, physical reasons like noisy, places, factories, or you're far, in a far place geographically. Also, failure to consider different cultures, such as the different cultures we have here, different countries, and also being in different time zones. So let's go into detail about barriers to effective communication. So we've got language barriers. It's quite clear. Cultural barriers, difference in cultural. Now we're talking about both cultural, as in where someone comes from, perhaps even cultural in regards to what we just covered, organizational culture. You come from a different culture, you come from a different organization, they do things differently than what you're used to. And also the normal culture as we understand it from where it's associated with the person's nationality and where they're from. Physical barriers, like we said before, physical distance, different time zones, closed office, door spaces, office doors, or having different spaces in which people work for different people of different statuses. Technological barriers, such as outdated hardware, computer hardware, machinery, equipment, out of date software, which are prone to viruses, technological failures such as software crashes, poor internet connectivity, organizational barriers caused by a lack of understanding of the functions. Um, Evidence of organizational barriers include, which is what if you see this and you'll feel, okay, this is organizational barriers are definitely there. Workers frequently contact the wrong person for getting a specific information. So you're contacting someone about HR, but you're contacting someone in another department, which is not in HR because you thought that person would help you. Important messages are lost or delayed somewhere in the chain of command, and employees do not know where to request information or how to share information. Grapevine communication, which is the gossip. If there's lots of this, then there's another chance that there are organizational barriers for the actual clear information to come out. Psychological and perceptual barriers. Psychological barriers or emotional barriers are caused by individuals with contrasting and conflicting mindsets, opinions, or priorities. The source of the problem is that people see the different, um, they see the information or different events in a different way. Examples of psychological or perceptual barriers include the lack of trust between teams, low morale, bitterness, unfriendly rivalry in the workplace, and cases of harassment, exclusion, and even bullying in the workplace. 6 steps to minimize communication barriers. Number one, ensure that the message is clear and precise, but also detailed, being specific. Keep the communication short as possible. Make sure that the method of communication is appropriate for the information to be transmitted and the culture of the receiver. Ensure feedback is part of the communication process so that problems with the understanding are quickly checked and clarified. Establish trust between senders and receivers. Ensure physical conditions are appropriate so messages can be heard effectively. Ultimately, it's a trial and error process. Definitely need to have in mind who you're communicating with in order to explain the message in a way that they will understand.